doubt to be made but that he could have been everywhere as poetical as he is in his descriptions and in the moral part of his philosophy, if he had not aimed more to instruct in his system of nature than to delight. With regard to the subject of his poem, Lucretius is to be contemplated as a natural and moral philosopher. The physical part of his philosophy, and most, indeed, of the moral part, he took from Epicurus, who, as Cicero observes, had previously adopted his physics from Democritus. Of this, the great principle is, that nothing can proceed from nothing, and that, consequently, this world in which we live, and every other object in the universe, was formed from matter that previously existed. How this matter came to exist, we need not enquire. We are to suppose that it existed always. In its original state, it was an infinitude of detached atoms, moving or falling through unlimited space, for that space is unlimited is by Lucretius elaborately proved. These atoms are infrangible and indestructible, for matter is not infinitely divisible. There must be a point at which division ends. They are hard and solid, or they would be unable to endure agitation and attrition throughout an infinity of ages. They are of different shapes, suited for the formation of various substances by combination. The number of their forms, however, is limited, but the number of each form is infinite. The atoms were moving, but whence had they the beginning of motion? From their own gravity, for all bodies move downwards by their own weight. This is the commencement of absurdity in the system. For, if space be infinite, one direction in it cannot be called downwards more than another. As Lucretius himself indeed acknowledges, observing that nil est funditus imum, nor can any reason be assigned why an atom should move from one part of infinite space to another. This commencement of motion, however, being assumed, it is next to be shown how atoms combined. Had they all moved, as might have been supposed, in straight lines, as they fell or proceeded through space, there could have been no coalition among them, unless the heavier had overtaken the lighter. But Lucretius, or Epicurus, had sufficient conception of the motion of bodies in empty space to understand that light bodies must move through it as speedily as heavy ones, and that, consequently, one atom could not overtake another. It was necessary, therefore, to make some of them deviate from the straight or perpendicular line, and it is accordingly assumed that some do deviate from it. This supposition, says Cicero, is mere puerility, for he introduces the deviation arbitrarily. He makes some atoms decline from the straight course without cause, and to say that anything takes place without a cause is to a natural philosopher the most disgraceful of all things. To assert, too, that some decline and some go straight onwards is, as it were, to give properties and duties to atoms despotically, determining which is to go in a right line and which obliquely. But when, from partial deviations, some had come in contact with others, they began to form combinations. They strove, as it were, for a long time ineffectually, but at length the larger and heavier atoms coalesced into the denser substances, as earth and water, the smaller and lighter into more subtle matters, as air and fire. From combinations of such substances arose plants and animals, as trees and worms still spring from the earth when it is moistened and warmed. Of the rise of animals in general, and of men specially, the reader will find an ample account, according to the notions of Epicurus, in the 5th book. Nature does not abhor a vacuum. On the contrary, it is necessary that there should be, throughout the whole of matter, certain portions of empty space, or the movement of particles would be utterly impeded. Water, for instance, could not be a liquid unless there were vacuities among its atoms to allow them to yield to pressure. Man consists of a body and a soul. The body is constituted of coarser and the soul of finer matter. Both are produced together and grow up and decay together. At death, the connection between them is dissolved. The soul takes its departure to be decomposed and mingled with other matter, and the body begins to decay, that it may undergo a similar fate. The mind is intimately connected with the soul, so intimately that they must be said to form one substance. Both are composed of heat, vapor, air, and a certain fourth substance, which has no name, but which is the most important of the four, as being the origin of motion in the whole man. That both are wholly corporeal is indisputable, from their power to act on the body. Tangere nim et tangi nisi corpus nulla potest res. Ideas of objects in the mind are produced by the mysterious action of images of things on the soul and intellect, images of a light vapory substance, which are perpetually passing off from the surface of all bodies whatsoever, and exhibiting the exact resemblance of the objects from which they are detached. Other images, too, are formed spontaneously in the atmosphere, as we see clouds, at times, form themselves into likenesses of things on the face of the sky. Of images, accordingly, the number is infinite, so that, whenever a man wishes to think on anything, the image of it is generally ready to present itself for his contemplation. If he cannot recollect what he wishes to think on, he may consider that an image of it is not at hand. Dreams are excited by images, which, as they pass through the air, penetrating the coverings of the body, come in contact with such atoms of the soul as are at the surface of the body, and thus communicate their impressions to the whole of the soul and mind. Vision is produced by the same images flying off from the surface of the objects at which we look, and striking on the eye. Reflection from mirrors and other smooth surfaces is produced by the image first striking the reflecting plane and then being reverberated to the eye. Voice, like all sounds, is a corporeal substance, because it frequently, as it passes forth, causes abrasion of the throat, and because much speaking exhausts the corporeal frame by detraction of atoms. The members and organs of the body were not formed with a design that they might be used, for there could have been no design in the offspring of fortuitously meeting atoms. But as they have been formed, and we find them capable of being used, we apply them, accordingly, to the uses for which they seem adapted. The feet were not formed for walking, but as we find they enable us to walk, we employ them in walking. Of all our knowledge, the foundation must rest on the perceptions of our senses. To our senses we can assuredly trust, for what shall refute them? Will anything distinct from them refute them, or will they refute one another? That which shall convict them of falsehood must be more trustworthy than they. But what can be more trustworthy? What shall convince us that those bodies which appear to the senses square, or hot, or black, are not possessed of those qualities? The motions and combinations of atoms being established, all natural phenomena, as thunder, lightning, rain, earthquakes, are easily shown to arise from their changes of place and effects on one another. Even were it not demonstrable that the world was fortuitously formed by the coalescence of atoms, it might yet be safely affirmed, from the numerous faults apparent in it, and from the various causes of suffering to animal life which it contains, that it was not made by divine wisdom as an abode for living creatures. It sprung into being casually, and animals that casually sprung from it make the best of that abode to which they are confined, and from which there is no release but death. This world which we inhabit is not the only one in the universe. The number of atoms being infinite, it is naturally to be supposed that they must have produced more worlds than one. It is therefore probable that there are many worlds of many kinds. And as these worlds have been generated, we may fairly argue that they also decay. Men, other animals, and the trees of the forest are born but to die. And why should not a world be subject to the same fate as the things which grow in it? We see, indeed, the symptoms of decadence in the world which we inhabit, for the present productions of the earth are not of the same vigor as those of its earlier days. All, then, around us, we may conclude, is making progress towards dissolution. The great globe will continue to sink and grow infirm, until at last mouldering and disruptured its